Hello once again from the Prim Reaper. So I should really know better than to make any promises regarding which content I will be putting out next, because truth be told, I never know when I'll run into a subject that, for whatever reason, really piques my interest at a given time. Indeed, that very thing has happened as of a few weeks ago. For a little bit of context, some of you may be familiar with Lindsay Ellis and her previous YouTube work. I'll be honest, I've only watched one or two of her videos, and while I found a decent portion of said videos to be inoffensive, there were definitely a few cringy social justice-y talking points in the ones I watched, so I just chalked it up to, alright, this YouTuber probably isn't going to hold my interest long term. I'm a busy woman, I can't watch the video backlog of everyone I come across, moving on. I didn't really hear much more about this person until I heard that they had been experiencing some major drama over being cancelled. Now, I'm sorry to admit it, but I always get at least a little bit curious whenever I see someone who has previously courted the woke political spectrum, and then it ultimately comes back to bite them. So that being said, despite holding no specific ill will towards her, I decided to check it out. Here is the offending tweet, and this is some real shit, so viewer discretion is advised. Also watched Raya and the Last Dragon, and I think we need to come up with a name for this genre that is basically Avatar the Last Airbender reduxes. It's like half of all YA fantasy published in the last few years anyway. Powerful stuff. If you're having a hard time figuring out what's wrong with this, she had this follow-up to say afterwards. I can see where, if you squint, I was implying all Asian-inspired properties are the same, especially if you were already privy to those conversations where I had not seen them. But the basic framework of TLA is becoming popular in fantasy fiction outside of Asian-inspired stuff. As you might be able to tell now, effectively this is, or should have been, a total non-controversy where a few salty grievance mongers on Twitter decided to call Lindsay a racist for a total non-sequitur of a comment. I mean, mistake number one was where she decided to even entertain the idea and to seriously respond to it in the first place. You know, rather than responding in any of the following ways. But then apparently the next choice of action was to take the nuclear option and delete her Twitter, which completely didn't matter because then it just gave other people the justification to continue to tear her down even further. And then I guess some other stuff happened until the end of the year when she decided to announce that she is quitting her YouTube work. Now, technically the letter she wrote announcing this is behind a Patreon paywall, but someone was kind enough to share the entirety of the letter on Reddit. I will absolutely not be reading the entire thing here, as that would take ages, but let me just read a few choice lines from it that captures the general mood. My life ended 9 months ago. What has been taking up bandwidth ever since then has been a ghost. 2021 has been the worst year of my life. I am traumatized by it. To this day, I still have people scolding me by how I handled it, that I should have handled it differently, that I should have controlled my stands, as if I had the capability to know what any of these people were even saying to strangers on Twitter while I was shitting blood for weeks on end. These same people who always crow about believing victims, telling victims of public dog piles that they do not deserve to claim their trauma, let alone to process it, because they deserved it. There is no such thing as cancel culture. There is no incentive, reward structure in places like Twitter to call people out. Mobbing is emotional abuse practiced by a group of people, usually peers, over a period of time, through methods such as gaslighting, rumor-mongering, and ostracism. It's most documented in workplace or academic environments, i.e., key points of capitalist tension, but is thoroughly institutionalized into feminist, queer, and radical spaces as well. Feminist, queer spaces are more willing to criticize people than abusive systems because they want to reserve the right to use those systems for their own purposes. At least attacking people can be politically viable, especially in a token system where you benefit directly by their absence, or where your status as a good feminist is dependent on constantly rooting out evil. However, the real piece of this letter that inspired me to create this video was as follows. But all I know now is that being in the public eye at all is a losing game, and I regret all of it. I regret every time I've ever stood up for anyone. It always backfires. I regret every time I pushed back against something unjust. It was always just used to hurt me. I regret every time I ever stood up for myself. I never did it correctly. I regret every time I showed any vulnerability. Just more ammunition to be used against me later. I regret every time I ever tried to play the game with peers and colleagues. They will drop you the second you aren't popular on Twitter anymore. It's all hollow and brittle, and if there is one thing I have learned this year, it is how eminently expendable I am. Now, before I go any further, I want to make a few quick points. 1. Again, I have nothing personal against this individual. 2. I feel for her, as obviously she's been having a difficult time with all of this, and I know how painful it can be to feel like everyone has turned on you. And 3, I'm not going into this trying to direct any of what I'm saying necessarily at her in specific. Not that she would obviously be in the mindset or the mood to hear it, even if I did. I have no doubt that someone has to get to a very bad place to say things like these. This entire paragraph very much reads like someone who has completely broken down, and it's a sad thing to see. However, if I'm being fully honest with everyone, my first reaction when I saw this paragraph was actually to feel more incensed than anything else. Again, not necessarily with Lindsay in specific, but just with the sentiment. I can say with absolute certainty that no matter what happens, never, ever will you hear me say, I regret having stood up for anyone, or I regret having pushed back against something unjust. I don't care what anyone says to me, or what anyone does to me, never will those words leave my lips, or my fingertips, as it were. The thing that came to mind when I saw those statements was, this is what it looks like when you have someone who is not acting on the courage of their convictions. And then I thought, that's actually a good thing to explore a little bit on a video here, because really, this is not just a relevant topic for myself, but I also think that it's a relevant topic to explore for general mental health purposes. So, what does it mean to act on the courage of your convictions? The general definition is to have the confidence to do what you believe is right, even when other people may not necessarily agree or approve. Now, in order to do this, you have to know and understand your beliefs. This might seem like a no-brainer on the face of things, but in truth, I actually think there are a great number of people who really have no idea why they do the things that they do, or at very least have an incomplete understanding of it. Let's think of some examples. A person who attends some kind of political rally because their friends are going and they want to show support. A person who calls themselves a feminist because they have seen other people saying that feminism means equality, or that you're either a feminist or you're a sexist. A person who believes in a certain religion or follows a certain political party because it's what their parents do. A person who believes or disbelieves in something when it is convenient for them, but then reverses course when it is not. A person who does something because of tradition or because that's just what you do. Or perhaps one that bothers me most significantly. A person who believes one thing, but then is convinced by friends, family, or even just by strangers that their belief is wrong in some way, and then uncritically pivots their view to try to fall in line. We have seen a great many examples of this last one lately. This, I think, features heavily in the cancel culture that we've been seeing. I find it particularly striking that those who appear to be most vulnerable to this kind of thing are those who feel the need to backtrack on whatever it is they have said or done and try to apologize to the mob. I think there's just something about this behavior that is particularly attractive for bullies online to exploit and attack. I'm not 100% sure what it is. Perhaps a sprinkle of feeling like you're better than others here, a smattering of trying to control the behavior of others there. However, I think a large part of it is the lack of confidence projected in the people who do this. Note that I'm not saying any of the following: that you can't change your views, that you shouldn't ever change your views, or that you can't change your views without looking like a coward in the eyes of others. In fact, I think that approaching many topics with caution and introspection is extremely important, because otherwise this is how you get people who believe in misinformation with blind faith and absolutely refuse to change their minds regardless of what factual information they are provided with, and this isn't a good thing either. But in these cancel culture cases I'm talking about, there's usually this sniveling, groveling quality to the about face of the individuals involved. They're not apologizing because they know they've done something wrong. They're apologizing because they don't feel good about having been called out by others, often in ways that are unjustified. In the former case, an individual may realize their beliefs or actions may have been based on incorrect information or were even immoral, and make a legitimate and fact-based change. In the latter case, they are flip-flopping on a whim, usually because of the subjective opinions of others. Opinions they likely wouldn't have agreed with or even thought of if other people hadn't said them first. How is it possible to act with any kind of confidence in oneself when the motivations behind what you're doing can be swayed so easily? If you are arguing for something in which you have absolute certainty, then you will not be so easily broken by someone who tries to challenge you. For example, if you argue that 2 + 2 is 4, and someone tries to tell you that this is not necessarily a certainty because of X and Y factors, you can respond that you appreciate their philosophical mind, but that it doesn't change a mathematical fact. Like me, when I argue that I think it is important that we address and care about men's issues because men are human and deserve the same attention to their concerns as women do, there's very little that people could say to convince me otherwise or sway my opinion on that. I have seen too many men go without services and feel as though no one cares about their issues while they face their struggles alone. I've seen too many men contemplate and even attempt and complete suicide because they felt like a burden on society. I've had too many men thank me for the work that I'm putting in to bring attention to and advocate for their needs. I've seen too many men express a profound relief when they have found an agency finally willing to even just listen to them, let alone help them. So when people try to come at me while I'm doing this work and claim in any way that I am minimizing women's issues, or that I have internalized misogyny, or that they feel that men have had their time in the spotlight and that it's time to talk about other things now, I can politely, or not so politely, thank them for their input, tell them that I will file it with the appropriate department. And stand resolute on the reasons why I'm doing things. The fact is, other people's beliefs or perceptions on what I'm doing or why I'm doing things really don't matter in the long run, because I know in my heart what my motivations are, and that those motivations are worthy. Whether other people agree, disagree, or get the wrong idea in some way is irrelevant. But when you are not acting on conviction, you invite room for self-doubt. When Lindsay responded to the negative reaction to her initial tweet with any amount of contrition, it is clear that this invited further negative commentary, which then resulted in further self-doubt. This obviously led to a total tailspin, which resulted in this sad state of affairs that is her current mental health over one of the most innocuous and insignificant opinions over one of the most irrelevant things I have seen in a long time. Especially when you consider that many of these people may have been coming out to criticize her with any number of motivations. They may have been benignly trying to change her opinion and steer her down the correct course, or they may have just been trying to virtue signal and make themselves feel superior. Or they might have just been bullies who get off on tearing others down behind a veil of anonymity online. Or they may have just been trolling because they had nothing better to do. Is it really worth it to give these people the power to control your mental health? I don't think so, pal. I say this to everyone who watches my videos, not just those who agree with me. Know why you believe the way that you do. Sit and take time to really think about it. Seek out alternate opinions and counter-arguments to your views. Take time to figure out why you disagree with those counter-arguments, or even contemplate points on which you do agree. Find as much data as you can and refine your views. I truly believe that you can only have real conviction in your beliefs with a great deal of hard work. However, I think it is worth it, because when you arrive at a place of true conviction, you can have the confidence to stand behind what it is you believe without crumbling when others try to tear you down. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.